All right, welcome everyone to the Kiali version 2.11 demo. This is the result of our 8th sprint of 2025. We'll go through what we accomplished in the last 3 weeks in preparation for the release on Monday of v2.11, and then we'll follow up at the end with a community meeting to discuss anything people want to talk about. So let's get into it. We just went through that part. So yeah, this sprint, we completed 43 different items. This is just a little look at our project board available on GitHub. You can see that most of the work, as usual, is in the main Kiali repo, but we do have work in the operator. We had actually a pretty decent amount of work in Kiali.io in this sprint, so we'll get to that. We'll touch on that in a future, in a moment. And then we've got our OpenShift console plugin, which also got some work in this sprint. So first main feature that we're delivering with this release affects our mesh page, where you can get the topology of your mesh. And one thing that we didn't support up until now is the fact that Istio can actually combine configs. So if you've got an additional user mesh config, which is specified with the shared mesh config environment variable, we'll now take that into consideration. Before this, we were really just showing you your main config, but in reality, what happens is these mesh configs get combined, and you end up with what you see here. What's really running is what we now show as the effective config, but you can still use these tabs to get to your standard config, and then find out which one you've added to it, basically over here. So you've got your individual configs, and then what's actually effectively been merged. So this gives you actually a more, obviously, a true picture of what config is actually running. And again, this is accessible on the mesh page when you click on your control plane icon. One thing that we've been spending a lot of time on in this sprint and before this and after this is, we recognize that Kiali is an add-on to Istio, right? You don't need to run Kiali, but we want to make it so that you definitely want to run Kiali at all times because it has a lot of benefits. But if Kiali has any issues itself, then it becomes a bit of a problem because we don't want that user experience, obviously, for people trying to use an add-on to then run into problems with the add-on. So we are trying to make it hopefully as easy as possible to install Kiali, run it, and if there's a problem, we're investing in sort of troubleshooting Kiali itself, so that we can quickly determine what's going on and get things back on its feet. In that vein, the first question we always ask is, where's the problem? When you're running Kiali, it's in a configuration where it has to talk to external repos like your metrics data source, your trace data source, the Kubernetes ABI, and we want to be able to know, are our connections to those things reporting in a very slow fashion for some reason? Is Prometheus overwhelmed, and that's why Kiali is, for example, not performing well or timing out or something like that? Or is the problem actually in Kiali somewhere? To do that, we've gone through our logging quite a bit. We've added structured JSON-based logging, which actually can perform request tracking of Kiali requests going through from the front end to the back end to the external repos and so forth. And then you can actually pick those out of the log using request IDs and so forth. We've enhanced our metrics, made sure that they're in good shape. But most of all, probably, is that there's now detailed help on Kiali.io. We always had basically a debugging Kiali page, but it's much more robust now. And so we want, and we'll be continuing to work on that as well, as it's still a focus area. So just the main thing to know, Kiali.io docs configuration debugging Kiali is going to be like the first stop to trying to figure out what's going on. Here's an example over here of what's on the page and a little bit about some teasers about how you would do some config there. Kiali tracing tool, again, this is almost in the same vein of being able to help out. I'm going to let Josune, who put this feature in, talk about it. Go ahead, Josune.
Yes, thanks, Jay. So this is related to, well, we are conscious about how difficult can be configure tracing lately, and especially when we introduce a tempo support and we have different providers and different configurations. So now we have available on this mesh page a tool that can help us troubleshoot and give us a valid configuration for tracing. And how does it work? So the first thing that it's doing is going to pick up our internal URL for tracing and is going to use that host. And the tool is going to see different and valid ports that are used usually for tracing, and no matter for Jagger and also for Tempo. And it's going to try different clients, the HTTP and also the gRPC clients, and it's going to do some tests to check what are the valid configurations. So no matter what our configurations are, the tracing tool is going to provide us basic and valid configurations for different customers based on these open ports. Like, for example, if we have Jagger available, if we have gRPC. So, for example, we have configured Jagger using HTTP, but we go to our tool and we run this check status, and it's going to give us a valid configuration for gRPC. So we may want to go and change this because gRPC can be like more quick, right? And this tool is going to be give us valid configurations because, for example, in the mesh page, we have a health check that is going to be for example, Jagger, but it's going to be a very basic health check. For example, it's going to go to our tracing URL and it's going to do a request, and if the request is returning a 200, our health check or Jagger service is going to appear as a valid service. But this tool is going to go forward and is going to be more exhaustive testing even if the endpoints of these URLs are valid or not. So it's going to help us understand or create more a valid configuration in case there is not. And yes, I think that's all, Jay.
Did we add anything on that debugging Kiali.io page for this yet?
Yes, we also have included a section related to this.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. But don't go anywhere because Josune is up again to talk about an ambient improvement.
Yes, this is another enhancement. In this case, is for ambient, and this is for a label that we can use in any of our ambient service. That, for example, when we create this istio.io ingress use waypoint equals true in any of our services, the traffic that goes to this service is going to be redirected from the gateway to the waypoint proxy directly. And in our mesh graph, by default, we are hiding the waypoint proxies. So instead of seeing this edge from our gateway to the waypoint proxy, now we are going to see this small icon about the waypoint proxies. That it means that this gateway is redirecting traffic through the waypoint proxy. And well, related also with this enhancement, we have also added support to include the gateway labels for the gateways in case we have any gateway from the Kubernetes API that was not seen before. So now we can see this both new icons in the graph that can help us understand better what we have when we have ambient and gateway APIs.
Great. Yeah, thanks. So just this right here, if you can see this, hopefully this is the badge that basically shows up now for gateways. And this is the node attachment or decorator we're indicating is showing that this gateway has this particular ingress use waypoint equal true. Prior to this version, if you had this I should say prior to the version that we're about to release, if you were using this label, you would have had a situation where you would have a node that was just kind of hanging here, showing the an HTTP link to the waypoint. So that's what's now hidden, and it now respects the show waypoints option. All right, thank you, Jasune. All right, let's talk about a few more notable changes that are coming out. For ambient, we do have a little bit of work here to, actually, I'm not 100% sure. Add partial selector match for Z-tunnel. Can you describe that one, Jasune?
Yeah, sure. So before, to identify for Kiali, to identify Kiali ambient, it was looking for any selector that was app equals ctunnel as a daemon set. So it looks in different namespaces, but specifically for this selector. But what happened, and this is what is created for ambient by default, right? But what happened is if you add an additional selector, this was not matching the selector, because it was really comparing the whole selectors as a map with the app equals ctunnel. So the problem was that if we added more selectors, or any implementation added more selectors to this ctunnel daemon set, Kiali was not able to detect ctunnel. So in this particular case, we have added just a match with this particular selector, that is app equals ctunnel, and no matter if we have more selectors or no in this daemon set, that is going to recognize this ctunnel and is going to detect that we are in an ambient mesh. So it's going to include more use cases.
Thank you. Also, we have this molecule testing for our operator for Kiali, and we've been finally, after a while, we were able to run this on a nightly basis on OpenShift and CI. So this is actually a big stability improvement for us on CI. So that's a welcome improvement on our back end. We talked about the gateway icon a moment ago. We're troubleshooting remote secrets. This is another configuration situation where you can get yourself into trouble if you have bad or incorrect configuration for Kiali. And this is also documented now on Kiali.io. And there's a hack script, which is publicly available from GitHub, that you can execute to basically validate your remote secrets. So we would encourage anyone, again, go to that debugging page has been beefed up considerably to try to resolve a variety of issues that people have been stumbling over and have been pain points for Kiali. We made an improvement to the Grafana config by adding data source UID. And we've done a little bit of work on perf, where we got rid of some unnecessary caching that for something where we could get the information in a different way from pods. Work in progress. I wanted to mention this sprint. We don't usually talk about it in the demo, but there's some significant things that are going on that didn't get completed in this sprint, but we're working towards it. A big one is an external Kiali deployment model for basically putting Kiali on a cluster outside of Istio's mesh, right? So think of it as a management cluster on its own, typically. That's going to be able to get your management resources in a separate place and not taking up the same resources as your production mesh, for example. We are working on a Kiali CRD schema for validating the CR. And we're also working on another sort of deployment model-ish thing, run Kiali locally, which is going to be the ability to just, instead of having to run Kiali in the cluster, you'll just be able to run it as a local executable, which could be mostly for developers, but a really nice enhancement there. Those are three things going on that you should see in the relatively near future. A couple of important bug fixes. There was an unusual rare startup crash when Istio was in ambient mode. That's been fixed. And another very sort of rare, strange situation where if you were performing an update to config of a workload, there was a code path that would result in a panic. That's been taken care of. But both very important if you happen to be the one suffering from that. The next sprint, I just talked about things that are in progress, but you can always go to our project board on GitHub to see what's basically going on. Everything from what's in our sprint backlog to what's already been accomplished for that sprint. And that is it for this sprint demo. So we'll see you next time. And we should be releasing on Monday. Thanks.